I'm going to go very straight to the issues that we have to discuss because some 5 minutes already gone before we started the show. Apologies for that. Now, Mr. Moa, the GNPC is seeking to get a loan of $700 million. That's such a mouthful. And the question that is being asked is, you are unable to get that money without parliamentary approval. You say that you got the Attorney General's, blessing to go ahead with it. And a lot of people, including MPs, are even threatening to sue, saying that you cannot do that. What is your response to that?
Yeah, as you rightly said, GNPC is raising $700 million to pursue very legitimate business that, has come as a result of GNPC's mandate. And we have gone through all the processes. We've met all the banks you can name in the world. We talked to about 20 banks, reduced it to about 11, and then further to 5, and then, further to 3 over virtually a 6-month period. So we've been very diligent in raising the loan. And we've gone through all the processes that are required by law, by the GNPC Act, and I'm saying Act because I believe that after the Constitution was put in place, you remember Prof. Crab was asked to look at all of the PNDC laws.
Review the laws. Move them from decrees to acts.
And then, get them to be consistent with the Constitution.
Right.
And all that. So essentially, we believe that we have, obeyed the laws. I mean, PNDC Law 64, which is the act that set up GNPC. And then also its link to the Constitution. And I guess everybody's talking about Article 181 in the GNPC Act. It actually subjects GNPC's borrowing to this article.
Okay. Now, before we get to that, you say, what do you need this money for? $700 million. What do you need it for?
$700 million. We're not doing exploration with it. I mean, you asked me what we need it for, but definitely it's not for exploration. It's for infrastructure, which enables us to develop fields and to deliver primarily gas to the people of Ghana. So essentially, GNPC this year was nominated as the off-taker of gas from our partners. And I'm sure you know about the Sankofa field. We're in very difficult discussions with our partners because it's essentially a gas field. And the gas field, the gas is going to be sold domestically. So that's a very difficult proposition because it's not an exportable. Gas is exportable, but given the size and the amount of gas that has been produced, it's technically become a domestic product. So the pricing negotiations that we're having are very challenging. And typically, to get financing from your partners, they would require exploration type returns on their money. So typically, Sankofa, if they're pricing the gas, they'll be looking at 22% return. But there are some aspects of that development that are infrastructure. And you don't typically, you can get money for infrastructure at much cheaper rates than 22%. So what our intervention is actually to finance the infrastructure part, which is essentially the pipeline that brings the gas onshore. And that will cost in the region of about $493 million. On top of that, $493 million, you have receiving facilities, which will enable us to, if you like, do some minimal processing of that gas to make it acceptable to power plants. So that alone is taking our $500 million of the $700 million. And the benefit that would come from that is that because you've reduced the cost of capital of 22% to almost, let's say 5%, just for the purpose of this discussion, 5%. There's a huge benefit in terms of price. So instead of maybe a $9.8 per MMBTU price, you can reduce it to more acceptable levels of about
so
$8.
you're taking this loan, and you're supposed to repay within 5 years.
Yes, within 5 years. But essentially, we see this as a bridge.
Okay.
So this is a bridge. We're doing infrastructure, and typically for infrastructure, you need a very long-term facility, let's say 20 years. But because of the urgency of the project, we look at this as a bridge, which we will refinance, and we are in talks with the World Bank to see whether we can refinance the amount so that we lengthen the period, and then it can even, benefit the pricing even more.
So by your calculations, by the close of the day,
yes,
how much are you going to pay on this loan, or everything put together? How much would you be paying when you are paying back?
In terms of interest?
Yes.
Yeah, interest is about 4.93%. Okay. If you add in the 3-month LIBOR, which currently is at, I think, 0.23, to the margin, which is 3.9%, and then there are some fees. So when you add that up, you come up to about 4.93, percent, which we think is very aggressive,
yes,
right, frankly.
And within the period by which you're supposed to repay the loan,
yes,
you would have paid a total of how much? Inclusive of the principal?
Well, that should be roughly about, I don't think it will come to $800 million.
It will not?
No, I don't think so. But I can give you the details.
Okay. So that in the end, what you're suggesting is that you'll be paying less than $1 million in terms of interest and all other, costs.
Well, 5% of, let's say, $150 million is what we're going to be paying annually, if you like.
Okay.
Yeah. Because you need to look at the profile as well. It's not going to be 700 million all the time. As you're reducing,
that's right,
the balance on the loan, you're paying interest on an outstanding amount, which is also reducing.
Yes, but
so essentially,
you would have worked the details. You don't have anything to share with us as to,
no, I don't have
by year one you would be required to pay this, and then at the end of the day, this is how much you would have
it's a
been
fixed amount. 700 divided by 5.
Okay.
And then you calculate the interest of 5% on the 700 in, let's say, the first year, and then in the subsequent years, it's 5% on a reducing amount.
But most essentially, you're saying that this loan is very critical. It's a lifeline to the GNPC's work.
It is critical, and I haven't finished the story.
Okay.
We also need working capital. And essentially, working capital is money that you're just rolling over, essentially. And if you're buying gas, the kind of security requirements that you have to put in place, which include putting money in escrow to guarantee payment. And you know how the value chain of, gas to power is in Ghana, and how sometimes, for example, ECG doesn't pay VRA, and VRA doesn't pay GNPC or Ghana Gas. We may be in default of paying for gas that we've taken. And this is really what we call a take or pay transaction. So whether you take or not, you have to pay for it, because the partners are investing about $4 billion in gas infrastructure, and all they are expecting to recover those costs from are gas sales to the Ghanaian market. They are not selling outside Ghana. They are selling into the Ghanaian market. So the issues that we have with the value chain in Ghana pose significant risks to them in terms of whether we'll be able to pay.
All right, so you just hold on briefly. Ms. Ayaka, what's your understanding of this proposition? 700 million and what the purpose is?
Well, I think he's explained the purpose. He's outlined exactly what it is that the GNPC intends to do with the funds. And I don't think that there is any dispute about the need for funds by the GNPC. The question has been, what are the alternative sources of funds that they should be looking at? The discussions have explored what options exist in relation to the petroleum revenues that are available, and clearly that is not enough in terms of how much they need. So that option has been explored, and the other option is fine, let your partners develop it for you, but at what cost? And he has told us that if the partners develop it, the interest rate for the monies that they will be investing is likely to be somewhere in the region of 24, 25%, 22%. So what do? You have to look for cheaper funding. And so the question of looking for cheaper funding is clearly a very rational decision, and I don't think that anybody can debate that. The kind of infrastructure that they are putting the funds into is consistent with our own strategy as a country in terms of the development of the gas infrastructure and the participation of GNPC in that industry, with the hope that when they participate, we will ultimately get the gas at a much cheaper rate to our domestic consumers. I think that strategy also is not one that anybody can debate. I think the key question in this debate is not whether or not they need money. It's not whether or not they should look for cheaper sources of financing. And the cheapest from the analysis clearly is from the banks that they've gone to. The key question from what I have listened to the discussions and discern is whether or not, if they are going for that kind of money, they should go to Parliament for approval. I think that.
Thank you very much. Yes. And we're coming to that point briefly because I want my viewers and listeners also to get to appreciate the purpose for the loan first before we discuss whether or not it ought to go to Parliament. Kweku, what do you know?
No, the critical area is the one that you don't want us to interrogate now. Yes. But otherwise, broadly speaking, nobody is against the purpose and the explanation given, if indeed that is what it is. I don't see any Ghanaian citizen who will be against that.
Thank you. Brevity is the soul of wit. What do you have to say also about, at least for the bit that you have heard from him and also from the minister in explaining why the loan is necessary, and then we'll move on to whether or not they can take it without approval of Parliament?
So I think you're really teasing us. But I mean, clearly everybody agrees that we need to develop that infrastructure.
Right.
We need to make sure that we add value to our resources. So there's no doubt about that issue. Like Kweku said, we just need to interrogate whether the money is actually going to be used for infrastructure development and the areas that he has said. I haven't been privy to look at the loan agreement. I'm sure most people haven't been. So we are all probably just making arguments and then raising issues without the proper basis. But I mean, once that is made available to us, we know what the facts are.
Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Moore, tell us now, you say you've done all the due diligence. You've complied with every law, as you sought to say. They are members of Parliament. They are also members of this country who say, no, you have not.
Yeah, and we are saying that based on the advice or the opinion of the Attorney General, we believe that we do not require parliamentary approval. That is not to say that under other laws, we will not go to Parliament to discuss GNPC's whole business and budget and the uses to which we put the funds that are given to us by Parliament. So, and essentially, I mean, the opinion turns really on the fact that GNPC should be seen as, you know, a separate entity from government for the purposes of this loan. Should be seen as a separate entity from government, because we are not borrowing for government. That's the first thing. There's no requirement of a guarantee from the government of Ghana. And you recall that in '96, we actually took a loan to Parliament. That was a loan that we got from the Japanese government, now called JBIC, Japan Bank for International Cooperation. And that was to build the Osajifo barge. We took that loan to Parliament because that loan had a guarantee of government supporting it. This is a loan that, finance people will call a non-recourse loan. If GNPC is not able to pay for this loan, there will be no consequences for the consolidated fund. And the basis for raising this loan is GNPC's share. And when I say share, I'm not talking about the share of oil, but the share of revenues that are placed into the Petroleum Holding Fund. And if you read the Petroleum Revenue Management Act carefully, you'd realize that the share that comes to GNPC is for costs and for capitalization. And that share is taken before the share that goes into the consolidated fund. So essentially, this is a loan that's not depending on the consolidated fund. The security for the loan is various accounts that will be set up. So you have a reserve account, you have a collection account. Those are the securities that are backing the loan. So we believe that if you read the GNPC law, and even in association with the Constitution, which says that the government will not borrow on behalf of itself or on behalf of a public corporation, I think the term "on behalf of" is important. And in this case, government is not borrowing on behalf of GNPC. It's GNPC that's going to the market itself. And we have been encouraged to go to these markets, the markets ourselves. I heard the minister talk about the fact that we cannot be depending only on, the official government sources for our financing in our march to become more and more commercial. And I think that with the setting up of the Petroleum Commission, GNPC is supposed to focus on being a commercial entity. So that's what we're doing. And I know that there are NGOs like ASEP that have raised issues about why GNPC is not going out there onto the capital markets to raise funds. So I think we should be encouraged to stand on our own in raising these funds so that we don't always have recourse, to the monies that are supposed to be dedicated for health, education and, other things. So basically these are the bases. And I guess the lawyers will also tell you that there's, a Supreme Court ruling that deals with public corporations going out to borrow on their own without necessarily guarantees from government, and without recourse to consolidated funds and all that.
Okay, so we'll get to those details, but what you're suggesting is that everything regarding this loan is going to be, as it were, privately secured,
ring-fenced,
yes, without any, national sort of the government's involvement.
Exactly.
So that in terms of any defaults, the state will not be called upon.
Because the security is clear. The security is not funds that are coming out of government,
right.
The government's kitty.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that point first. Now, Kweku, what do you say to that?
Well. Very, very, very fine submission. There's an attempt to also do a certain extension. It's quite interesting between the GNPC as a corporate entity and government.
Correct.
And then zeroes in on the consolidated fund because the GNPC share is from the Petroleum Revenue Fund.
And he says it is paid even before the money is put into the consolidated
GNPC,
fund.
the sole shareholder is government. Am I right?
That's correct. Single sole shareholder
is government.
Yes.
Before I proceed any further, was it so difficult for GNPC in proceeding to acquire this loan to notify Parliament or a committee of Parliament relevant for its purposes? Has the GNPC been interacting with Parliament? Have they been submitting their reports and things to Parliament? Have they been dealing with Parliament? If they have been dealing with Parliament, was there any notification to Parliament relative to this particular transaction at any time.
Your answer to the questions you posed are in the affirmative, right? That they've been dealing with Parliament.
Yes, it looks that way.
Right.
The evidence shows it.
Okay.
But in this specific instance, I do not have the answer.
They say they
All
don't
my
find it
checks.
necessary.
No,
That worries me.
No, that's not what we're saying.
That worries
in
me.
terms of our broad, can I
Yes, why not?
Yeah.
We're all
in terms
seeking
of our
information.
broad intent to raise financing, I think Parliament is very much aware. In
The
all
700 million.
Well, we've told Parliament the needs that we have, and they do know that on a long-term basis, we need to raise financing.
No, it doesn't answer my question.
It does, because under the PRMA, what we go to Parliament for is annual budget. It's annual budget. But you'd notice that in going to Parliament for annual budgets, we do talk about GNPC's strategy and GNPC's plans and all that. For this specific loan, we will go to Parliament in 2015 for the 2015 budget, and this will come up definitely.
Post the event.
No, but
After you had acquired
we've not
it.
finished raising the money.
No, we're
still in discussion.
But that's the point. So
Yeah,
what
we've
was
not-
it
Okay.
that made it difficult or virtually impossible for Parliament to have been put in terms of knowledge and information on this huge transaction? Nobody doubts the purpose. I think we are all in agreement. And the money is big, you know that.
I got one.
Yes. So what is it makes a corporation owned 100% by the state think that, look, I can proceed to undertake this particular transaction without prior notice? I'm not talking yet of approval. I've not come to approval.
Yeah.
I'm saying for good governance sakes, for transparency, for accountability, even in the interest, enlightened self-interest of the GNPC itself. And considering our history relative to GNPC and how it behaved once upon a time as an octopus, all over the place, acquiring loans left, right, center, going into all sorts of investments, and now we are starting on a clean slate. What is it that made the GNPC management think that, look, we didn't need to give Parliament prior notice? Because, you see, sometimes the prior notice helps. It helps the corporation itself. It helps public accountability. People then discuss some of these issues we are discussing today would have terminated on the floor of the House or even at the committee level as to whether you needed approval or you didn't need an approval. But at least once that information, the wealth of information that you are giving to us, and it's good one in terms of the essence of this acquisition transaction, would have been on record.
But Kuku,
It appears that-
what do you
Can I
know
come in?
that
Can I
it is mandatory that they get parliamentary approval? Is that the case?
That there's a gray area there. I am inclined to think that eventually this matter should have parliamentary approval. I'm inclined. I'm not a legal mind, but that is my inclination at this stage. But I am saying that it is untidy if Parliament is ignored entirely, and that appears to be the case relative to this particular transaction.
Okay, let me get Mahama Yarga's view on the legal question. The NPP has been very clear about it. They say that, well, this thing cannot happen without parliamentary approval. They ask the question, whose monies are going to be used to repay the loan? It will be the taxpayers' money.
Public
they say
funds.
that emphatically, and then, even threaten that they may have to proceed to court to stop this action if it's not brought to Parliament for approval.
Well, I think that this is a situation where we should be guided by the laws.
That's right.
That is the Act establishing the GNPC and the Constitution, the laws that regulate borrowing by statutory corporations,
Right.
and how that has been explained and interpreted.
So
by
help us.
our
What do
courts.
those laws say?
First and foremost, there is no provision that enables GNPC to deal directly with Parliament. People misunderstand. GNPC is a corporation under a minister. So GNPC has no mandate to deal directly with Parliament. when they are doing something, they cannot write directly to Parliament and say, we are doing this, to give notice to Parliament. Indeed, if they do that, they will be undermining their minister. They deal with their minister.
But the Minister of Energy, who should notify Parliament?
Yes. So,
it's the same thing.
Yes. So let's get back to the procedures, just so that we understand how the systems work. GNPC doesn't deal directly with Parliament. Under some situations, when the energy minister brings his budget to Parliament, and one of the corporations that he oversees is the GNPC, and in the act establishing the GNPC, there's a provision that the government may from time to time make direct grants and allocations to the GNPC. Otherwise, ordinarily, the GNPC is supposed to find ways and means of financially managing its affairs. But from time to time, government may make grants to GNPC. So if the minister seeks an allocation from the central budget to GNPC, then he captures that in his budget proposal, which then has to be defended before a committee of Parliament. And under those circumstances, the committee may often require that GNPC staff come and join their minister to explain to them the things that they intend to use the money for. That's how GNPC comes in their dealings with Parliament. Otherwise, it is the sector minister. Now,
so the sector minister could not have given notice to Parliament of this transaction, could it?
Yes, so now we are looking at governance. I think the issues that we are dealing with today...
You're referring to the GNPC's laws, and I can see you have opened that on your iPad.
Yes.
Can you refer us to the various provisions and help us to understand that they do not need parliamentary approval to be able to go on with this?
For instance, let's go straight. I was trying to explain systems and processes.
Okay.
Some of them are not spelled out in the in the act. I've spoken about government advances and grants, and I said that Section 16 of the GNPC Act says that the government may, so it's not even mandatory for government to give them money. Government may, from time to time, approve advances and grants to the corporation out of money provided by the government for that purpose.
That is 16. Can you read 15?
Yes.
It's irrelevant to the issue.
Let's start with 15.
No. You didn't even look at the issue of parliamentary approval. You said you were going to look at the issue of notification, whether there shouldn't have been notification. So I'm trying to address that and say, in our system of governance, is that okay? There's no legal obligation on GNPC to provide that notification to Parliament.
Is it on the sector minister?
And there's, in fact, there's no legal obligation on the sector minister to provide the notification to Parliament. However, as a sector minister, in the exercise of his powers and functions, he is equally accountable to the law and to Parliament.
Thank you.
And the mechanisms for accountability are also spelled out. So there's no law that says that if he is going to exercise his powers under Section 15, which we'll look at, he should provide notice to Parliament. What he can do is to exercise the powers as spelled out under Section 15 in reporting to Parliament the exercise of his powers. Is that okay? In the budget.
After the event?
Yeah, after the event. Yes, after the event.
Interesting.
He will provide the information.
Okay.
I'm not sure that that's what it is.
Well, then you have to show me a copy.
I was asking you to read Section 15 first, and then we'll move on.
May I read Section 15?
Okay, he wants to read it. Let him read it, and then let's
but it's
go on from
important. We'll read Section 15.
Okay.
But we're dealing with the issue of notification.
Okay, that's okay. We have dealt with that. Can we move on now?
Okay, so Section 15 says borrowing powers.
Yeah.
That is 1, subject to subsection 2, the corporation may borrow sums required for the purpose of meeting any of its obligations or performing any of its functions.
Correct.
Yeah.
Subject to article, that is subsection 2. So section 1 says subject to subsection 2. And subsection 2 says subject to article 181 of the Constitution. The power of the corporation to borrow money shall be exercisable only on the recommendation of the minister and with the approval of the minister responsible for finance as to the amount, source of the loan, and the term and conditions under which the loan may be effected. So if you listen,
subject to 181.
Yes.
But so go and read 181.
Subject to
What does 181 say?
No, subject to 181.
What does it say? Does it mention GNPC?
No.
It doesn't have to mention GNPC.
It says government.
Listen, subject to.
It says this is subject to 181.
Yes,
And Article 181
and
is
Article
a
1.
precursor.
Let's read 181.
Yes.
And Article 181.
Let's read 181.
In summary, is that article that demands that such international transactions or whatever should be brought to Parliament.
Yeah, but
Exactly.
read it.
Now,
read it well.
let's read
It says
181.
government borrowing
181.
on its own behalf.
Yes.
Why
181
is this saying subject to 181?
181
But you
says
read that.
Parliament
Just read it.
may, by a resolution supported by the votes of a majority of all the members of Parliament, authorize the government
Yeah.
to enter into an agreement for the granting of a loan out of any public fund or public corporation. Is that okay? Then 2, an agreement entered into under clause 1 of this article shall be laid before Parliament and shall not come into operation unless it is approved by a resolution of Parliament. And then 3, no loan shall be raised by the government on behalf of itself or any other public institution or authority otherwise than by or under the authority of an act of Parliament.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the issue then boils down to
Who is raising the loan?
Who is raising the
who
loan?
is raising the loan.
It is
Yeah.
GNPC, not government.
Is it government?
Yeah.
Is it a public institution or an authority?
Is it government raising it on behalf
yes,
of a public institution?
Yes. So is it
So
raised
you
by
are
government on
interpreting
behalf
the
of-
Constitution
Yes,
now.
yes. So
Well,
raised by the
now you're
government
discussing.
on behalf of itself or any other public institution or authority. So where government is raising a loan on behalf of itself or any other public institution or authority, then you are caught squarely by the provisions of this act. Now, the argument is that GNPC, as a statutory corporation, is not a public institution or authority within the intendment of Article 1813 of the Constitution.
It doesn't matter that government is 100% shareholder.
but that's that.
Well,
that
but
is public funds.
That is the idea.
No,
There
just
are
take it
rules.
easy, take it easy. Yeah.
Yes, so that is the whole idea. The whole idea is that you need to distinguish between statutory corporations of a commercial nature, is that okay? And state institutions that are carrying out public functions and authorities. So that is the whole
Doesn't have to.
idea.
It is not.
No,
Doesn't have
no,
to.
no,
No, I'm
no,
asking.
No, listen.
Oh,
So
please,
that is
please
the
allow
whole
him.
idea.
Please allow him.
That is the whole idea. So the move is to begin to allow the the state corporations to behave like proper corporations. Because what has happened in the past is that, for instance, Ghana Airport Authority, Ghana Airport Company, this is a company doing business. They are making a lot of earnings from people using their services. And on their own balance sheet, they should be able to go to the market, borrow, use it, and then pay back. But what does government do? Government will go forcefully borrow on their behalf. Is that okay? When you forcefully borrow on their behalf, then you go and burden yourself as a government with the liability for that loan. And the worst part of it is that you go and then provide sovereign guarantee for them, which makes it easy for the person giving the money. And financially, it is counted as part of the debt of government. And that is what has been the basis of all this argument that the debt to GDP ratio is very high. That is because we have gone taking money unnecessarily on behalf of private, not private, but commercial corporations that on their own can go and take those facilities, carry out their business, commit their revenues. And if you go to the minister, you ask for permission to go and borrow, the minister is supposed to look at your sources of revenue and satisfy himself that you do have sources of revenue that you can use to offset these liabilities when they accrue. So that is why it is said that when you are going to borrow, go to your minister. Let your minister, in consultation with the Minister of Finance, the Minister for Finance, really look at your request, analyze it, examine it, satisfy themselves that, yes, you can borrow on your balance sheet and that you'll be able to pay, and then give you the permission to be able to pay. So there's some element of state supervision, but it is not expected that it is at the level of Parliament.
You don't understand it. You don't understand it to be that we're starting with this. This saves the Energy Ministry. First, the Energy Minister does the recommendations. The Finance Ministry does the approval, and then it is subject to Parliament because of this particular injunction in Article in its own acts. That is Section 15. And why don't you read that in relation to 1815? 1815 of the Constitution is that this article shall, with the necessary modifications by Parliament, apply to an international business or economic transaction to which the government is a party as it applies to a loan.
Yes, that is the issue. The issue is government.
It's not a party.
Is government a party in this transaction? I can understand that some people feel that because government owns a particular
government is the shareholder,
commercial entity.
Yeah,
is that okay?
That's
majority shareholder.
Shareholder has other businesses.
Oh, please. Don't be interacting.
Is the majority shareholder or the absolute sole shareholder in a particular commercial transaction, okay? Then it means that anything that corporation is going to do must, in terms of borrowing and entering into an international commercial transaction, must come to Parliament. Indeed, okay. there was a case. There's a case. No, it's important to refer to this case. There's a similar case in which the Ghana Ports and Harbours Authority did enter into an international commercial transaction. Somebody challenged it in the Supreme Court, indicating that it violated the provisions of this constitution, and the court came to a conclusion
there's a marked difference that ought to be observed first.
Yes.
That was an international or economic business transaction and not about a loan.
Yes.
That is number one.
Yes. But then you are saying that this article says that it should be modified as if it were a loan.
Yes.
So this article intends that both in the case of commercial transactions and in the case of loans, this principle should apply. And in that case, the court said that no, these corporations, strictly speaking, are not government.
Okay.
Is that okay? They are institutions of their own pursuing commercial, interests, and therefore they should not be subjected. And said that in some cases maybe, is that okay? But it didn't spell out.
That said in some cases which he spoke about, what is the new alter ego? That is the Ghanaian definition, the new alter ego doctrine. That the government, if it is found that the government is hiding behind such an entity to do this international business or loan, so to speak, and that the real party in the transaction is the government, then the article applies and it must get parliamentary approval.
Yes, so your duty in this case, assuming that you are adopting that interpretation as the criteria, your duty in this case is to show that the government is indeed the party in this transaction.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
But is it also obvious?
No,
okay, gentlemen, let's move on.
It's not obvious.
Hold on. See this. Let me tell you this. Maybe you are not watching the time. You are not watching the time, so you do not know.
Okay.
I've given you such a long time to speak because I knew it was for a good purpose.
Yeah.
Now, what's your understanding? There are a lot of people who say you cannot say that the man behind man used quote unquote behind GNPC is not government, because GNPC is government and government's money.
You see, when Kweku started, he took it from a very soft position that he said, for the purpose of good governance, it would have been nice to have engaged Parliament.
Right.
I believe that if that engagement had happened, all these questions wouldn't have come up. We would have known clearly whether the loan was being taken on behalf of government, okay, or whether we should believe what my brother here is saying. But as we sit now, most of us haven't seen the contract. We haven't seen the loan agreement. And with a background that the government is the 100% shareholder of this entity, you can safely assume or conclude that the government may be hiding behind GNPC to take this loan. Okay? If that kind of engagement had happened, it wouldn't have come up. But again, I ask a question. The framers of this act, they definitely had something in mind when they said subject to Article the 181. Okay, clearly they knew that there will be certain circumstances like this, and I guess we are just trying to hide behind words and wordsmithing, okay, to wriggle our way through. I mean, there would have been nothing wrong to take this thing to. What are you trying to hide? Why do you want to go to Parliament? You're taking a loan of $700 million. As Kweku said, it's big. It's gargantuan. What are you trying to hide? What stops you from taking it to Parliament? I mean, what stops you from taking it to Parliament to get everybody approved? Everybody to get a Parliament.
They have sought advice, and they've been advised that
no, but this is not. What is not what the 15.2 is saying. This is not what 15.2 is saying.
Didn't we have an AG advice on Oyomi and what have you? That led to the payment of those dubious.
Let me ask a question.
You finish, and I'll come to you.
In the event of a default, what happens?
Yeah, in the event of a default,
yes.
I've told you about the security.
Which security is that?
The security are accounts, collection accounts, reserve accounts.
Public funds?
Is it
Public
for
funds?
No, it's GNPC's funds.
How?
That's not public funds.
I mean,
It's public funds.
once it gets to GNPC, it's GNPC's funds.
It's not your money.
If you capitalize,
Don't behave like the GFA. It's not your money.
If you capitalize a company, the company has its own personality, and the shareholder is separate from the company. I thought that was basic, basic in corporate governance. The shareholder, you can't have a shareholder. Let's say all Ghanaians say they own GNPC, and one Ghanaian goes into GNPC, picks one of its vehicles, and says, "Because I own you, I've taken it."
You are inviting us into the realm of absurdity.
No, it's not.
You were
But
earlier,
that is why there's a separation.
Since you have taken
between,
over,
yeah.
you were earlier referring to the Felix Klomega versus the Attorney General case,
Yes.
in which you sought to use the exception that was provided by
The
Dr.
alter
Ba
ego.
in the question of
the alter ego
Now, I bring
issue.
to your attention that alter ego issue.
Yes.
And from that,
Yes.
what is your understanding? I feel that this is how, let me see if you also understand, that generally Article 181, that's 181, would deal with three kinds of scenarios.
Yes.
And these will be the scenarios, three kinds of transactions or scenarios. That's one, loans by government.
Yes.
Number two, loans to the government. And number three, international business transaction.
Yes.
You don't feel that this is loan to the government that
Not
ought
at
to be
all.
subjected to
Not
parliamentary
at
approval?
all. And it's not loan that government is even borrowing on behalf of GNPC.
Let me read the judgment. Let me
Okay.
just read the ruling.
Right.
Is that okay?
Which part of it?
When I read,
Before you do
because I
that,
typed it,
before
I
you
don't
do
know
that,
exactly.
before you
I
do
have
that,
it here, but
before you do that,
yeah.
let me just talk about this alter ego thing. I referred you to 96 when GNPC borrowed, and it was government that was actually standing in front of GNPC, and government was actually a party to the loan. The loan that we got from Japan.
We have come a long way from 96.
Yes, but that 96, the constitution hasn't changed since
No,
96.
not the Constitution. The Supreme Court has been interpreting the Constitution in very
Yes.
recent times
Yes,
about
yes.
when there is a requirement for parliamentary
Yes,
approval.
but most of those are actually government. I mean, if you look at the Balkan issue, it was actually, I think, the Ministry of
Exactly.
Energy, and that's
Exactly.
clearly government.
Yes.
Okay?
But this ruling says, this ruling says, even when it
statutory
is not
cooperation.
the ministry that is acting as in pair for government,
Yes.
but where it can be established
Yeah, but-
that it is government that is hiding behind that entity.
Yeah, but how do you establish? It's not government that's hiding. I've told you.
But show us
all the
agreement.
things.
So take the agreement to Parliament.
Yes,
let
but
the
we
Parliament
will go to Parliament.
after the fact.
Not after the fact.
So
This borrowing is not a 1 year.
Let's hear
borrowing is not
to
for
Parliament before.
utilization.
Let's hear Mama Yaga.
Before they think I started already running.
Okay,
It's not.
5 budgets of GNPC.
Sorry. Let's hear Mama Yaga briefly. Yes.
The court said, in the context of Article 1815 and the facts of this case, the second defendant, Gapoha, is not to be regarded as coming within the meaning of government. As pointed out by the defendants, to subject statutory corporations with commercial functions to the parliamentary approval process prescribed in Article 1815 will probably increase the weight of Parliament's responsibilities in this regard to unsustainable levels. Accordingly, it is reasonable to infer that the framers of the Constitution did not intend such a result. Thus, in our view, government in the context of Article 1815 should mean ordinarily the central government and not operationally autonomous agencies of government.
Okay.
Where an agency has a separate legal personality distinct from central government, it usually comes under sectoral ministerial supervision.
Correct.
The board of the corporation...
GNPC has a separate legal
entity,
personality, right?
Personality from government.
Okay.
And it is under the minister's supervision. The board of the corporation and the appropriate ministry should then exercise oversight over its international business or economic agreements.
Okay.
Parliament will be sucked into unnecessary, militia if it were to have the function of approving the international business or economic agreements of statutory corporations.
Okay.
That is why government in the context of Article 1815 should be interpreted purposively to exclude corporations, such as the second defendant.
So you say this is squarely the case.
This is what
But in the
said.
same case, what you are not reading is the exception. Let me read the exception
You
to
have
you.
to prove that.
The exception is this,
Yes.
that Eba said, the mischief that the alter ego doctrine would be helpful in suppressing is the possibility of the central government seeking to evade parliamentary scrutiny and approval of its qualifying agreements by getting a statutory corporation to enter into an international business or economic transactions that would otherwise fall within the ambit of Article 1815. The alter ego doctrine has the potential for development to respond to these loopholes. In short, Article 1815 is to be interpreted as follows. Generally, the contracts of statutory corporations are not within the ambit of the provision. That's what you have just said. However, in exceptional circumstances, through the application of a customized Ghanaian version of the doctrine of alter ego, the contracts of a Ghanaian statutory corporation could be brought within the intendment of Article 1815. What do you say?
And GNPC falls right there. Look, the resources at their disposal, which belong to us. That's a strategic entity. We ought to make them fall within that ambit as a way of protecting our interest as a nation.
To make them fall.
You can't leave it to them alone.
The resources there only belong to us after they have carried out commercial transactions and paid the cost of those commercial transactions and declared that these are the dividends after they have paid the cost.
Okay, you're still here on Newsfile on Joy 99.7 FM, and also you're watching us on your multi-TV. This is your Joy News channel. Gentlemen, please. And you're also watching us on your Joy News channel on multi-TV. This is Newsfile, is your most authoritative news analysis show. My guest in the studio, Abdul Malik Kwekubaku Jr., Mahama Yarega, George Anda, and also Mr. Amwa, who is coming from the GNPC. He's in charge of certain strategic management issues, and you can hear it from the way he speaks. Now, I would like George and yourself to wrap up on this particular discussion about this issue. But indulge me. This is one Ghanaian who shares this view on this particular issue and why GNPC he feels. Okay. And I'd like you to respond to that, why he feels GNPC ought to come under parliamentary approval. So dispel that and let's move on. Now, this is a gentleman who is in finance areas and things of this nature. Evron Hughes. He says, there are, in my view, at least 4 reasons why this loan must come before Parliament. These are: A, mineral, oil, gas, and related energy resources are of far-reaching national security implications and consequences, which is why they are vested in the state. State institutions managing these resources are not doing so for themselves as a normal commercial venture, but as custodians. There is no justification for any reasoning which posits that a custodian institution like GNPC can and should act as a normal commercial entity. Such a view will be dangerous to the national security of Ghana because, by implication, the board of GNPC can commit the resources of an entire nation to uses which might be reflective only of their narrow institutional and even personal interest. The agency cost alone of this view is not tenable under any reasoning whatsoever. I'll just give you his one more reason. I won't read all the 4. It says, related to the above is the fact that, especially for oil and gas resources of Ghana, revenues and utilization of same are structured and the subject of a specific law. There is little or no room for discretionary uses of revenues from our oil and gas resources. It is therefore unthinkable by any stretch of the imagination, again, to aver that a group of people sitting at GNPC can commit the revenues of the state in a collateralized deal without the scrutiny, approval, and oversight of the representatives of the people, that is Parliament of the Republic of Ghana. What do you say to that?
Well, I think he's broadly right in saying that, you know, the mineral resources of Ghana should be looked at, you know, carefully. And I guess that's why we have laws in place. I mean, the Petroleum Revenue Management Act deals with this very clearly. And that's why the oil, when it's sold, first goes into the kitty. And out of that, something is carved out for GNPC. And what is carved out for GNPC is for specific purposes. It's very strict. It's for specific purposes. So we go to Parliament to defend those specific sources. And we do that every year. So we are not outside parliamentary control in that sense. You know, and really, I mean, GNPC, in order to be able to develop those resources for us to benefit in the first place, needs to be capitalized. And that is also recognized by the Petroleum Revenue Management Act. So we are not mortgaging the resources themselves. It's really just the portion that is allowed for GNPC to operate to ensure that those resources are transformed into revenues in a sustainable manner. I mean, we're talking about Jubilee. Jubilee is going to get finished in the next
and as far as you are
10, 12 years.
The most important point for you is that in case there is a default, the government of Ghana and we, the taxpayers, will not be called upon in any event.
No. And because the security structure is very clear.
I see.
The security structure doesn't say that, for example, if we default, then the entity can take our oil away.
Okay.
No.
Do you have assets that are privately yours and not the government?
When you say privately, then you're talking about the corporation having an individual personality. Is that right? So we should have a balance sheet. So GNPC should have resources as an entity. Otherwise, there's no basis for GNPC even existing.
Forgive my non-legal approach to it. You have assets that do not belong to the state.
They belong to the state. Is a beneficial owner, but it's not a direct owner in those assets.
I see.
When you are a shareholder in a company, you are a beneficial owner, You are not a direct owner.
And as far as
the
you're
entity
concerned,
is
this
separate from you.
This is an entirely a business entity.
Exactly.
But GNPC
That's
is a regulator.
what Klomega
It's not
said.
just a business commercial
With
entity.
the establishment of Petroleum Commission, regulation is purely the mandate of Petroleum Commission,
Okay.
and policy is purely the mandate of the Minister
Judge,
for Energy.
what's your final bit on this?
I think we should get this clear that GNPC is actually a state agency and it's not like a normal commercial venture like a Yunsu Start factory or
we agree.
or Gihok.
That's
And
why
so
there's a PRMA.
you cannot behave like that.
They don't go to
I mean, clearly, again, I'm going to remind us about what Kweku said about good governance, okay, about engaging Parliament, and you have not brought this agreement for scrutiny. So how can you sit down there and expect that it's not the government, and expect everybody to believe that it's not the government that is behind it? I mean, if it's not the government that's behind it, put it out there.
The opposition actually is saying
Okay,
the
Minister has oversight.
to use you.
The minister said
money.
Put it out
the
there.
law says the minister has oversight, and the
Put
minister
it out
goes
there.
to
Put it
Parliament.
out there. Let us see it. Okay. In
me tell you
case
how-
of
let me
default,
tell you how
let me
to
land.
land.
Please let me land.
Let him
Please let me
finish,
land.
let him finish.
Let me land. In the event that there is a default, okay, you're going to be relying on some resources. Yeah, these resources belong to. You are saying that GNPC, but it belongs to the government. Ultimately.
Yes.
So,
Yes,
of
yes.
course, it belongs to every Ghanaian.
Yes.
Okay, so you cannot be, in quotes, mortgaging our future oil.
We are not doing that.
No, please. You cannot be mortgaging our future oil with something like this and not expect that this thing should go to Parliament.
Yeah.
Well, something asked you that how much, what assets do you have?
Yes.
You have a balance sheet.
Sure.
You have over 200 million sitting in your balance sheet in cash.
Like any company has cash.
So
Every company must have cash.
what is the you are disbursing this thing 150 million this
over
loan.
5 years.
Fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this
So
is-
fine. So what is so pressing that you are in such a hurry?
I
to
just
close this thing?
told you. I mean, I
But you
thought
have
your
one- you-
issue
you need
was
150.
parliamentary approval.
It is
But I
parliamentary
started
approval
by
because
telling
of
you what we're
because
using the
process.
money for.
I agree. We've all agreed that
Yeah,
there's
so
a
why are you
need
asking
for
that question
No,
again?
I'm telling that you have funds sitting down there.
Yeah, but that, I mean, what I talked about, the pipeline and receiving facilities alone is $500 million. You need working capital.
Please,
I mean-
I think this thing should go to Parliament. Let us all be convinced. Let us not have a situation where after the fact something goes wrong and then we all have to reverse, do a 360. Okay, let's follow due process. I mean, Honorable Minister is a fine gentleman. I'm sure he'll push that case for us.
Let me show you how it could go to Parliament.
Yeah.
Because you see,
No, but you agree that it should go to Parliament.
No, listen. For me, we're looking at process.
He's actually
Yeah.
asking
I
my
think
very
that in
final
substance,
question to
yes.
you.
Yes.
Do you think that it should go to Parliament?
For good governance.
No, listen. In substance,
Process, yeah.
everybody agrees that it's okay to go for the money.
Yes.
What we want to do is laudable.
Yes.
It is better to use that money than allow partners to develop the facility and then we'll pay 25% interest.
That's true.
Yeah.
So in principle, nobody is against the amount.
Sure.
Is that okay?
With the intent.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, the key question is, should there be parliamentary approval or not? For me, that's strictly a question of law. And I've said that looking at the law, I take a position that in terms of prior approval of Parliament, the law doesn't make provision for that. Now, there's a way, however, of getting the matter to
In Parliament. Yeah.
If the day that any member of Parliament had gotten hint about this transaction, the person had quickly gone to ask an urgent question on the floor of the House.
Which they have done.
Is that okay? The minister will be compelled, even as of now that they haven't really, I don't think they have even finished, processing the facility.
No. We haven't.
The minister would have been compelled to come to Parliament to provide the full details of the transaction and have members of Parliament ask questions.
Kweku is saying that will be after the fact.
No, even before the transaction.
We haven't drawn
is
down the
it is
transaction.
possible that
What
it
is
is
the
possible
status
that
of the transaction?
it is possible.
We have not
almost
drawn
finished.
down. No. We are
No,
doing
but it's almost.
Well,
From
almost,
what you put out there, it's almost.
Yes, almost.
Sure.
Yes. So
So a lot has happened with that
so for
parliamentary
me-
intervention.
Okay,
So for
okay,
me,
now
it's
let's
a
have
question
Kweku.
of
Let's have
process.
Kweku. Yes,
Let's
Kweku.
process.
If people want, let's all respect
Kweku, just
the
in a
laws.
minute. Just in a
And,
minute. Yes.
and let me just conclude also.
Yes.
Let me just conclude also. Sometimes when I listen to the debate, is that okay? I think that part of it appears to me to stem out of, the questioning of the sincerity of government. I think that you may have issues with government, but sometimes you need to look at these things properly, because today is this person, tomorrow is this other person. And then also, you know, don't do anything that will undermine the institution, because this kind of discussion can sometimes even scare the lender, or even increase the cost of the money, because then people begin to feel that maybe engaging in unnecessary risk. So for me, these are critical issues.
On the flip side,
that looking at the law, you don't need prior approval. But like you said, information to Parliament. This is a government that is supposed to be open and transparent, and our Constitution, you know, states principles of openness and transparency.
Just why don't you want the people to bless it?
No,
go to Parliament and let their representatives bless it. Why don't you want to do that?
Where the law says that go and get the blessing of the people, we go. When the law says that go for approval for your budget, we will go next week for approval for our budget.
But this law in section 15.2 says that whatever has to be done is subject to Parliament approval.
No. But in the decision of the court said no. As for
you have read the general position of the court.
It says.
However, in the exceptional situation,
it says that if government, if you suspect that government is hiding behind a corporation to lend money for itself and not the corporation going for the money. But in this instance,
you don't think GNPC constitutes an exceptional situation in this case?
It's not about the character of GNPC.
Okay. The case.
What is GNPC taking the money for? And they have shown that we are taking the money to invest in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
We have to end the discussion.
Listen, you see, where, for instance, you can show that government really is not, the minister is not giving approval to GNPC to lend the money to construct gas pipelines and etc. But that they're actually borrowing the money because teachers are on strike and they want to collect that money and then go and then pay the teachers. Then you will be able to say that no, these people, they are hiding behind this corporation.
I think the point is well. I think the point is well.
You will see that.
Gentlemen, sorry.
It's intriguing.
2 minutes.
It's intriguing.
Please.
Maybe I'm wrong. If it's a wrong impression, forgive me, my brother Ayariga. I'm getting the impression as if, well, it's good that we don't talk too much or talk at all about such things because it may scare investors and all. That a code of silence could also promote or sow the seeds of impunity from officialdom. So perhaps we should strike the balance. And the balance is exactly what we are doing here. Very well-informed discussion. We are learning from each other and the rest. And parliamentary forum is the best place. See, I feel uncomfortable. We will go. With people who...
We will go.
I feel,
Sorry. Gentlemen,
I feel I'm instinctively suspicious of people who want to exclude Parliament from such things and want to actually just feel the comfort of dealing with the executive wing. I'm instinctively suspicious. So there's something perhaps hiding somewhere that we are not being told.
Those who are threatening
to bottom line. That's exactly what I was going to say. No. Bottom line, we should go to court.
Okay.
Bottom line, we should seek interpretation.
Thank you very much.
Just one bit.
Yes.
I mean, when Honorable was rounding up, he made reference to the point that issues like this would scare investors away. Could scare investors away.
No, I'm saying that in the relationship between the statutory corporation and the lender, is that okay?
Yes.
They are supposed to be an autonomous entity carrying out their business transactions. Now, some form of discussions within government sometimes can affect the balance of confidence.
Just 2 minutes.
I just need 1 minute. We've all been in this country and there have been issues like this, where there hasn't been proper scrutiny and it has ended up turning around to bite us. We shouldn't lose sight of that. We should learn from that. Indeed, I think the investors should rather feel much more confident that parliamentary there's a parliamentary endorsement. It guarantees them. So for me, I think...
And you are saying this with the benefit of the line of cases we have had in the Supreme Court recently, where the Supreme Court has said because there was no parliamentary approval, this is no,
Yes.
it's not valid.
As my brother quick will say,
There is a danger.
In that case, there's
There's a danger there because when you extend it to government, then they are seeking another source of security. So you should look at the balance.
We are not
Thank you.
extending to
Thank you very
government.
much, guys. Thank you. Let me share with you some of the views that are coming in. Someone says, is Ayaraga not a member of Parliament? Why is he making an argument that seeks to diminish Parliament's authority? Why is he okay with GNPC accessing such funds without the prior knowledge of him and his colleagues in Parliament? So why is being asked? Sefo Yamusa in Kumbungo says, if GNPC believes there is no under-carpet dealing, what prevents them from seeking parliamentary approval? Musa Abattoir in Kumasi says, this issue of GNPC procuring loan without parliamentary approval is mind-boggling. If minority thinks it is in breach of the Constitution, they should go to court and stop politicizing the sensitive issue like this. Kwesi Ejare Chum in London says the Constitution trumps all laws and Parliament has to approve it. I thought it was this sort of behavior which got Chachuchikata into trouble a few years ago. Ibrahim Kopa in Tamale says the GNPC has no justification whatsoever to borrow this loan without parliamentary approval by using the moribund PNDC law. We haven't discussed that one here. When the 1992 Constitution is the supreme law and it states otherwise.
Sure.
Sarkodie Ado in Germany says it is very shady for a corporation like GNPC, which is 100% owned by government, to go and borrow money from the market without parliamentary approval. And who would foot the bill in the event of default payment of the loan? Spike in Ohio says GNPC has the nerve to go for such a titanic loan without the approval of Parliament because they have no respect for law and order. They should not hoodwink anybody to think this loan will benefit Ghanaians. Emmanuel Donaya, sorry if I got your name wrong, says, if they have all these good intentions, why didn't they go to Parliament for approval as the law requires? I smell something. You didn't say what it is that you're smelling, so stop smelling. Simon in Wale Wale says, Parliament must put an eagle eye on this GNPC loan. Chop chop is likely to be the end result. We will take a break here and return. I just want to say thank you very much. Your text messages are flooding in so much, but I'm sorry we are unable to take all of them. So we're taking a break here. We are returning, but without Kwame Into-Amwa, who is Manager Strategy and New Business at GNPC. Thank you very much for coming to the studio.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We'll be right back.
Thank you.